Well, with me today is Steve Bell. Steve is an award-winning musician with over 20 albums, I believe that is. He is a speaker, he is a writer, he's an activist. I would consider you a theologian. I don't know if you would take that moniker on yourself, but I would.
Yeah, I think that's the kind of thing other people can say that about you, like that.
Sure.
Then, yeah.
If you say it about yourself, he just seems arrogant. But yeah. But I say that.
Well, that's a funny thing, right? Because in our day and age, and how we process knowledge and how we value another's knowledge, like those things are very they're up for grabs. And who do
Sure.
we give our respect to, and all that.
Absolutely, yeah.
Whatever theological thoughts I have are not formally formed.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah,
But you are a deep thinker. Which,
well, I get that from my dad. Dad was always sort of a guy that did that work himself too. So.
Sure, yeah. Thank you for being willing to converse with me today.
It's great to be here.
You have described your ministry, which is more than just being a musician. You're a retreat leader, you're a speaker. I've heard you describe your ministry as refreshing Christian faith and spiritual tradition for the weary and the wary. I wonder if you can kind of just unpack that a little bit.
I can. I do realize that my music, like I have done activist work.
Mm-hmm.
I've got my own agenda
Sure.
of this and that and the other thing, and I get involved in this and that ministry or this or that project or justice cause or whatever. But in the end, I think what people have come to me the most is for something like almost like a medicine.
Okay, sure.
There's something medicinal at a spiritual level about what I do, and
Mm-hmm.
it does refresh. And we are in a season of profound weariness and cynicism.
Right. Yeah.
And I've got so many friends that have left Christian faith in the last 5 years specifically.
Sure.
People that just say, I'm out. I've just
really
seen too much.
Yeah.
If this sort of very cynical, if Christianity can't produce Christians, I'm out.
Sure.
Yep. That sort of thinking, so there's a deep wariness, but there's also weariness in the sense of the world is like we're in definite apocalyptic times.
Yeah.
And I don't mean that like things are going to be Mad Max by Christmas or anything like that.
Sure.
But an apocalypse is really it's the ending of an era so that another one can begin. It's good news. Like a childbirth is apocalyptic.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So it's not like it's not just negative, but things are coming to an end and something new will come. But it's
so that life can emerge.
Life can emerge, but it's frightening.
Yeah.
And it's dangerous
Sure.
always because people get weird and then so we're kind of there.
Yeah.
And I just realized that there's something about my music, and it's not intentional. I don't know why, but that when I sing my songs or when I write them and sing them and tell my stories, that there's people do an exhale and they sort of feel like there's good oxygen going in.
Yeah.
It's I don't know how to describe it.
Well, I think there's an articulation of that season where we are, and that weariness that sometimes we all carry around with us.
Mm-hmm.
I came across a phrase, and I can't remember where I heard it, but it talked about Christianity, the danger of Christianity's toxic positivity, right?
Mm.
This is kind of this thought that, well, faith just makes everything okay.
Right.
And just grit your teeth and sing "Shine, Jesus, Shine." But your music doesn't do that.
No, well, for one, it's nobody's actual story.
No, exactly.
I mean,
it wasn't Jesus's story. Yeah,
it wasn't Jesus' story. It's certainly things didn't end well for the disciples. Like
sure,
they certainly didn't end well for him. They certainly didn't end well for the disciples. I mean, there's a season, like if you look at the book of Mark and read it politically, this was serious apocalyptic times. Like the world as they knew it was coming to an end. 70 AD, Rome came and sacked the whole structure of their way of being. And this would be like, for them would be 9/11 times 300.
Sure. Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like our world
Absolutely.
just changed. The worst imaginable thing has happened, and it was real suffering for real people. And And so there's no reason to somehow say that our faith, there's just no historical reason to suggest that we're therefore, because we have faith, that we're somehow preserved
Yeah.
or shielded from real suffering, real
Hmm.
malice. And I think we're seeing that now. Like, people are mean, people are
Yeah.
dangerous. There's these bugs that'll. I just lost a dear friend a couple days ago
Hmm.
to coronavirus.
Oh, I'm
So
sorry.
it's
Yeah.
like, yeah, it's happening. It's,
Sure.
it's so
Absolutely.
this. So if the faith and if the traditions can't speak into that, then we should just move on. But I think they
Sure.
do. I think they do. I mean, the scriptures themselves, besides whatever theology is embedded in them, it's poetry.
Yeah.
There's something about it that suggests there's more to than meets the eye.
Sure.
Um, and I think with scriptures, it says behind all that, there's still a profound something that is profoundly good and benevolent.
Yeah.
And that is something I have felt since before I came to a Christian articulation of faith. I remember that as a wee
Mm.
boy. Some of my first memories is feeling enwombed in goodness.
Oh, wow. Great. Yeah.
And but my mom was suffering with a nervous breakdown.
Okay.
Like there was, like, it
Sure.
wasn't.
There was,
It's not like
yeah.
things were. Yeah, it
Sure.
wasn't Disney, for sure.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Well, and, not, when I say that you articulate these things, this isn't that, that your music is dour or negative, right?
No.
It's entirely hopeful,
Mhm.
but you give voice to some things that sometimes we don't know how to voice.
Yeah. I don't typically write like I probably go through a lot more agony and angst than my music would suggest.
Okay.
But it's because and different people are different. Like, I find that my songs come out after I've made peace with things.
Mm-hmm.
And so I can talk about,
Sure.
like hard things in my life, or can refer to them, but the songs come after I have sort of, I guess, made peace with
Sure.
them.
Yeah.
So they're not a denial of them.
No,
But
no.
they're not coming from my songs aren't trying to ward off the darkness. The darkness has been
Sure.
there.
Yeah.
Right. So, yeah.
But there is this recognition that we can bring that stuff to the Lord. We can bring it to God. We can name it.
It's the only
and God welcomes it, actually.
It's the only place.
Yeah.
Gosh, that's what, somehow that we have this idea that we have to protect God from us.
Yeah,
from
sure.
darkness is just an arrogance that makes just no sense.
Yeah.
Or arrogance is probably not the right word, but it's just a misplaced spiritual ethic.
Well, and I don't know, I have come across, I've been ordained for close to 20 years now. I know I don't look it, but I've been ordained for close to 20 years. And in every parish that I've been in, I have come across people, largely from kind of an older generation,
Yep.
who have said to me that and I don't know where it comes from, but they were taught that it was wrong to pray for themselves.
Oh.
And I don't know, if this was just random people in weird and wonderful communities, or if this was kind of a systemic thought during a certain time, but there was this, but the agony that they have about, feeling all of this weariness or this discomfort or these questions, and not feeling like they had an avenue to articulate it, to talk about it. And it created a tremendous amount of sometimes guilt and shame within them.
Yeah. Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
Because I shouldn't have these doubts, or
absolutely.
Or I mean, it's linked to sort of prosperity thinking that faith should shield us from these things.
Sure.
Or that
Yeah.
success is the sign of God's favor.
Yeah.
Or that all of our children are, going to church.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah.
So none of mine do.
Mm-hmm.
Am I a failure as a father? Well, certainly on many levels. But there's only one place to take that.
Sure.
So let me tell you a quick story.
Yeah.
I'll try not to over tell the story, but and I won't mention the person, but there was a young woman in my past who was trafficked.
Oh, wow.
And when she was a young teenager, and when I heard about it, there's this absolute rage.
Sure.
In me that a human being would do this to this young child that I knew and loved. And I had this dream one night that I was Rambo. And it was, I know it's not hard
No,
to
yeah,
imagine.
sure.
But like, I just had the guns, I had the, the sweaty skin, I had the
Sure.
muscles. And I sort of, in this dream, I burst in on the space that these men that had trafficked her were meeting, and I executed them.
Oh, wow.
Bloody. It was a terrible, terrible
Sure,
thing.
sure.
And I remember at the end of the scene being unsatisfied because I had killed them too quick. They hadn't suffered enough for what they had done.
Okay.
And so, being a dream, I could rewind the tape and go in
Sure.
the second time, kick
and
down
fix
the door.
it. Yeah.
Yeah, and now I'm aiming at the knees and
Sure.
and other places to make sure they suffer. And at the end, when it wasn't enough. And
Yeah.
and I ended up in this panicky cycle of not being able to make them pay enough for what they had done.
Wow.
And I woke up in this cold sweat and feeling horrible about myself. Like, where is this? And what do I do with this? And who do you tell this story to?
Sure.
The next night I had the same dream, in the sense that I was Rambo again. I had the guns, I had the righteous anger.
Okay.
And but I'm now in front of the cross of Christ.
Wow.
On Golgotha. And there's no others. There's just me and Christ is hanging there, staring at me with just a dead stare. I've got the gun, and I'm expecting Christ to say to me, "Put the gun down, Steve."
Sure.
Right? And I'm thinking, no.
Yeah.
I know what you're going to do. It's not, and forgiveness is the most unfair thing ever.
Sure. Yeah.
There's no way, that you can't ask me to put the guns down.
Yeah.
That's not. The voice said, "Shoot."
Huh.
And I'm kind of, what? And the voice said, "Shoot." Like the Lord.
Sure. Yeah.
The defenseless Lord on the cross. And horror is like, you can't ask that of me either.
Yeah.
And the voice just said, "This is the only place you can do that."
Huh. Okay. Yeah.
And then the voice also said, like, you got to understand that I didn't die on the cross for the sins that you've done only. I died on for the sins against you.
Sure. Yeah.
This is the place.
Yeah.
And I remember, it's a longer dream, and it's very emotional and very dramatic, and I hope I'm not wigging anybody out, but I eventually, this voice kept on goading me until all the anger surged in me, all that rage, and the gun came down, and I watched the bullets go in, and I basically, in a sense, executed Jesus.
Sure. Yeah.
And all this rage is out of me, and then I fell over onto the ground once the bullets were spent. And I'm just sobbing and weeping and heaving and wondering what happens to me now. Like, I've just, like, what happens to people like me?
Sure.
And terrified and angry and sad, all those things. And I looked down and I could see this dark ooze going through my veins. And wherever my body was touching the ground, this anger, this sludge, this was pooling out of my fingers and my knees, wherever I was touching.
Yeah.
And the ground absorbed it. And then behind it came, I don't know what, like a liquid light. Again, it's dream language, right?
Sure. Yeah.
And I was flooded with, I could only call it love, but nothing that I could explain, nothing like I knew in my experience.
Yeah.
And the immense gratitude that I felt that I was given that opportunity to really let that stuff go.
Yeah.
And to the only one that can absorb it without more harm.
Sure. Yeah. Absolutely.
And no guilt, no shame. I just felt Christ saying, "Now you get it. This is why I'm here.
Yeah.
Bring that stuff here."
Yeah.
Right? So.
Yeah. Well, while you were talking, I was thinking about that psalm that says, while I kept silent, my bones wasted away.
Wasted inside. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like I said, you're deteriorating inside.
Yeah.
But this is the place. The Lord is the place to take your, and we're now dealing with like terrible anxiety, terrible disappointment.
Yeah.
Right. Terrible fear now, like,
and hurt.
Hurt and angst about our kids and our grandkids.
Yeah.
What are my grandkids going to face? Well, we need to know what this whole faith thing is about. It isn't so that stuff won't happen. Is that we've got a safe place to deposit these things where they can be transformed, become life-giving, rather than life-sapping. Yeah.
Absolutely. I always try to remind people, the book of Job, that I always find it really, really quite profound that in the end, Job never gets an answer. Like
Yeah.
he spends an entire book just yelling and asking questions, and he
Yeah.
doesn't get an answer. But what he gets is he gets a presence.
Yeah.
He gets a realization that God has never abandoned him and that
Right.
God has been there the entire time.
Right.
Right. And that's the only thing that can carry us.
Yes. And that the real place to take your actual humanity, the only
Yeah.
safe place, is in the presence of God. And we think,
Yeah.
deny the humanity, deny the anger,
Yeah.
deny the rage, the fear, the disappointment, and then we can go to Jesus with our piousness.
Sure. And be rewarded. Yeah. Yeah.
And somehow be rewarded. And it's just, it doesn't actually make sense.
No. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So what does worship then look like in this place of weariness? Again, if we're not just gritting our teeth and singing "Shine, Jesus, Shine," if we're not just toxic positivity all the time,
Yeah.
What is the role of worship?
Well, boy, that's a hard question, and you can answer that 1,000 ways, and of course they're all inadequate. But I find I can more just sort of say what it's become for me,
Sure.
and what it isn't is this place to sort of go eat spiritual candy or
Yeah.
get all that kind of stuff done for me. But I think I've really come to understand that it's not God that needs us to worship God. There's no ego problem there.
Sure. Yeah.
God knows who God is. There's
Yeah.
God's fine.
Yeah. Yeah.
So this isn't for God in the sense that we would think of it, but it's that I need to be uncentered.
Hmm.
You know what I mean?
Sure.
I need to be decentered, because if I'm the center of all this stuff, then it's just gnashing of teeth and
Sure.
sorrow and greed and ego and all those sorts of things. So it's, I think, to some degree, worship is God's gift to us to decenter.
Okay.
And sort of observe or look on Christ, who is the center. Someone says Jesus is, who was it? Jesus is the one whose center is everywhere and whose circumference is nowhere.
Oh wow. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, you know what I mean? And so it's that exercise of turning from self orientation the other way.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a deliberate, something we do with intention.
Sure.
Now, it can happen for all kinds of people without intention, right? So it can happen during sex. It can happen when you have a baby or see a great sunset. Well, all of a sudden, for a brief second, you turn your attention to the other thing, and you experience wonder and amazement, and, in a sense, relief from self.
Okay, you feel caught up in something.
Yeah, something, I just think those are just sort of foretastes of what God is saying all along, is that this is what eternal life is.
Sure. Yeah.
Right? This is whatever it means temporally, we don't really understand. But in terms of quality of life, it's that, in a sense, disorientation, because we have been oriented towards self in a destructive way. And so worship helps disorient and at the same time reorient the way, in the direction that we were created to function in the first place. So I don't know if that makes sense. I don't understand it. I don't understand why sometimes it seems to work and other times worship just is annoying or boring. I don't know those things.
Sure. Yeah.
But I have found that just a discipline of it is enough.
Sure. Absolutely.
So I no longer think, did I enjoy the worship service? Did they do a good job? That's just not the point of it.
No, absolutely. Yeah. Well, it does take a certain willingness to be both, to be unsettled. Like if our desire is to meet the one who confronts us and unsettles us in worship, then we have to risk being unsettled. And being unsettled might be, well, I went to church and they didn't sing any of my favorite hymns. Right.
It didn't entertain me.
Sure. Yeah, exactly.
Or I didn't get what I need out of it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So therefore I'm not going to go to church anymore because I'm not having my needs met. And the older I get, the more I think that's the disease.
Sure.
That's the disease to be healed from. And again, if God doesn't need this, and I'm pretty sure God doesn't.
Sure. Yeah.
Then what is the purpose? And I think for me, like, even if you think of the mystery of the Trinity,
Yeah.
However you unpack it, what seems to be at the core of it is that the very nature of God is a communion of persons
Yeah.
that are
Yeah. Yeah.
mutually other oriented.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So
Yeah. Exactly.
there's a mutual other flourishing.
Yeah.
The Father pours his life into the Son. The Son pours his life into the Father. Each is sort of is referencing to the
Yeah.
other,
Yeah.
not self-referential. And so if that's true, and if we've been made in the image of God, and then if whatever sin is, it disorients us, it turns us inward rather than outward, then it only would make sense that there would be some way back. And I think worship is certainly part of that. It's not magic, it's discipline.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I remember realizing once when I was reading one of the Gospels, and it just talked about, Jesus at the temple. And I thought, so Jesus is legitimately the only person who could legitimately say, you know what, I can do this on my own. Right. And the person who enjoyed an eternity of heavenly courses now sits and hears the, out of sync, out of tune chanting of human priests. Right. And who enjoyed perfect communion now sits amongst a community of people who gossip and backbite and all this kind of stuff. And yet he was there all the time.
Yeah.
Right. Why was that? Why did Jesus kind of give himself to the temple all the time?
Well, but that word kenosis, you empty yourself. It seems to me that has always been who God is.
You have what I'm going to do is I'm going to pause because there we go. So we have you back. You paused a little bit there. So
no worries. Yeah. No worries.
I
don't know where we were now.
I don't know either. Yeah. Let me ask, because you have an album on the Psalms. And I love, and I love the Psalms. I didn't always love the Psalms. And so there's been a journey of me of rediscovering the Psalms and finding them a really big source of inspiration and encouragement and articulation for things. How has the Psalms been important for you in your spiritual life, in your music, in your ministry?
Well, the Psalms sort of came alive for me where I realized that how human they were.
Sure. Yeah.
Like profoundly human. So the first Psalm I set to music was Psalm 90. Satisfy us in the morning with your love, that we may sing for joy and be glad in all your days. But the line, which is all lovely, but the line that set the song off was, may the favor of the Lord rest upon us in our land and establish for us all the work of our hands. Well, I was late 20s, just came out of 10 years in the bars. As far as I was concerned, I'd wasted my life. I had a wife and kids, no career path.
Sure.
I just like a total failure. And I see this line in Psalm 90, and I'm full of shame and regret. May the favor of the Lord rest upon us and our land and establish for us all the work of our hands. And I just started weeping and weeping. And what I needed desperately was meaningful work.
Sure.
And sort of feeling like I had blown the time given me to find that. I now have too many commitments, and just praying. And the more I prayed it, the more it seemed it wanted to be sung. And so I ended up writing this little melody. May the favor of the Lord rest upon us and our land and establish for us all the work of our hands. And I'm weeping, and I created more. And then in the end, I had sort of, in a sense, appropriated this ancient text, written by someone in a quite likely very different scenario.
Sure,
but somehow, and I think it's because, and I realized then, the nature of good art is that art shouldn't be too particular.
Sure.
Right.
Yeah.
Like, yes, when I write a song or make a painting or something, it means something to me. But the most important thing is, what does it mean to you? What does it?
Yeah.
What does it grab? What does it pull out of you? And if you only get what I tell you to get out of it, it's really not art. It's didactic.
Sure. Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? And so, And all of a sudden I realized, oh my goodness, there's 150 of these here.
Sure, yeah,
He says they're open source documents.
yeah.
Yes, there's a Francine or an Ed that wrote them,
Sure,
that had struggles with their jobs or their works,
yeah.
or but these are open source, and I just sort of started to read them way differently
Yeah.
as art first.
Okay, yeah.
And that would sort of grab me and then give me language and permission to pray things that I either couldn't give myself permission for or wouldn't have even thought to.
Sure, yeah, absolutely.
And then the other piece being also helped me to pray for other people who, wherever this one came from, I'm not there, but
Sure.
somebody clearly has been and will be.
And probably is right now.
And probably is. And so
Yeah.
even if I come to a psalm that's like, I'm not at that place.
Sure.
But now I kind of go, but people are, and
Yeah.
I would, and I need to pray for them.
Mm-hmm.
So I just find them it solved a lot of problems for me in terms of what prayer means.
Okay. Yeah.
What and again, in a radically individualistic, theology and society, it's sort of up to me
Sure.
to pray properly or to know or whatever. And I'm kind of, all of a sudden there's this huge relief because I don't know what to pray. I'm not even quite sure what's going on half the time.
Yeah.
And I certainly don't know the mind of God.
No.
But there's something about these pieces that kind of draw me in and make me feel like I'm a meaningful piece of God's redemption in the world, and also redemption of me. Mm-hmm. In my real scenarios, my real messy scenarios. And so I've it's kind of a long way around, but that's kind of how they work for me.
Well, and I think it's great, it's because I think, they usher us closer to God, right? Mm-hmm. But they also usher us closer to ourselves. Like they unearth our humanity.
Yes. Yeah.
And there's a point when I think we all struggle with sometimes not knowing exactly how to pray.
Right.
How do I describe this inner kind of stuff?
Yeah.
And I always find that, the Psalms are the places where you can read something like you read, or, mm-hmm. How long, oh Lord, will you forget me forever? And then you start thinking, that's how I feel.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Insert self here.
Yeah, exactly. That's right. Yeah. And it just, then all of a sudden things kind of come pouring out.
But the other thing is that this has been the prayer book for thousands of years of the church. This is not a unique experience.
No, exactly.
So my battered and messy and confusing humanity gets voiced, but it's also, you start to realize this isn't unique. I'm not uniquely a mess. Yeah. I'm not uniquely sad. I'm not uniquely grieving or angry. This is, so I don't need to feel either particularly bad or wonderful about myself.
Sure, absolutely.
Because there are those songs of orientation. Everything is great.
Yeah.
And there's not, like in terms of numerically, there's not that many.
No, I know.
Ones, but there's that too. There's times when like God's good, I'm faithful, God's faithful, things are working as they should.
Yeah.
That almost sense of just bounty and prosperity and things are working and all that kind of stuff. That's true too.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. And so, and I've had those moments in my life too. Not a lot, but they're there, and I'm allowed to say those things. I'm allowed to sing those.
Yeah,
things.
absolutely. Yeah. I want to ask you about, because you just did a video for a song that you did a while ago, which is for the Dark Night of the Soul.
Right.
So I just wanted to ask, and the song is brilliant. I love the song. I love the video. Why return to it? Was that kind of like a pandemic kind of?
No, it's yes and no. I mean, I think, and my last album is we can talk about that a little bit too. But like for me, okay, I just had to put my cards on the table. The last 5-6 years have been very difficult with the whole Trumpism and and not knowing what, like, profound disappointment in the church, or at least in segments of the church. Profound disappointment in friends that I love.
Okay. Yeah.
And anxiety about that, not knowing how to respond to what I saw as a pretty great dark, like just feeling disoriented.
Sure. Yeah.
I thought I knew who I was talking to. I don't. I thought I knew what I belonged to. I don't. And you all of a sudden realize things are not what I thought they were. And again, it's an apocalypse. It's the end of the world as you know it. So part of it is grieving what's no longer true or may never have been true.
Okay, sure. Yeah.
But and again, I like the word apocalypse. It always means because a birth is coming.
Sure.
Right. So it's not hopeless.
Yeah.
But in the time, it sure does. All the familiar
Yeah.
references are gone. All the things you hang on to for safety, security, well-being, all those when those things are taken away from you, and you're just out in this vast space with nothing, no place to
Yeah.
put your foot down. And so like the last years have been that for me, for sure.
Okay. Yeah.
And even worse so because I'm at a stage now that people are sort of expect me to have something to say.
Okay, sure. Sure. Okay.
And then here's the other thing, you know, as you get older too, is like, man, I used to know stuff.
Okay. Yeah.
I used to tell you what I knew.
Sure.
Young people used to come and ask me for advice, and I would give it.
You would give it to them. Yeah.
Yeah. And now I'm kind of going,
Sure.
I'm pretty bewildered by a lot of things, and there's that's a frightening place to be.
Mm-hmm.
I think, and that's so it's a dark night of the soul.
Sure.
There's no reference.
There's no reference. Yeah.
Yeah, but there's a beauty in it. There's
yeah.
If we can sit with the discomfort rather than try to turn on the lights as quick as possible.
Sure.
That's our thing. It's like, where's the light switch?
I
do not like this.
Well, how do I define this part?
Yeah, how do I define this? And some of the great mystics would say, I mean, there's always an answer for this stuff, but you know, like you'll get blinded by looking into the sun, and sometimes the darkness you're experiencing is because you've gotten close, not because you've gotten
yeah. Well, and I think the line that struck me from what you sing is something about here in this barren dark to meet the one I knew so well, right? Like, and so that there's this comfort is also a place of profound intimacy if we allow it to occur.
If we allow it, but if we have a theology that darkness or discomfort is a sign that something's gone wrong,
yeah,
then we're gonna be looking for light switches, rather than groping around and then feeling that hand that we know and smelling that breath that's familiar to us, and embracing and holding and being safe and warm. So it's just it's a different way of thinking about what the dark times mean.
Sure.
And certainly sometimes they're because there's malice and there's
danger.
Sure, I'm not saying that every.
No, of course not. Yeah.
You know, but we shouldn't be quick to jump there.
No. Yeah.
You know. Yeah.
So is that what you were trying to do in your latest album as well? Because you got great titles for yours, because I hunkered down and because I languished for, and I thought, well, is this a pandemic project too? Like there's a lot of really strange blessings. There's a lot of really great messages for our times.
Well, you know, it's funny. Every song on that album was finished, written before the pandemic.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah. So there's not a single pandemic song on there. So
sure.
The last one I wrote, the actual physically last song I finished writing was in January, just when we're just starting to hear.
Sure. Yeah. Rumors.
Rumors, and it's the oh, you mentioned it in your email to me. What is it called? Oh, hold on.
Sure.
Long Shadows.
Long Shadows. Yeah.
Yeah. Long Shadows, and and that was really fueled by a combination of what I saw happening in the States with American Christian patriotism.
Yeah.
And it's really exposed by the Trump allegiances and all those kinds of things, in combination with the fact that at that time Australia was on fire.
Sure. Okay. Yeah.
We sort of forgot, like, that continent was ablaze 2 winters ago, you know, and so pandemic wasn't even on anybody's mindset. So but it all fit into the pandemic, because again, what the pandemic has basically done is it's unleashed, I think, or set us the whole Western experiment has been to have mastery over nature.
Sure.
And it's sort of, in a sense, unhinged us from that security. And we're simply not. And so I think that a lot of the songs were written in a sort of a pre-apocalypse.
Sure.
But I think there's something. I think all of us felt this was coming.
Yeah.
Something has to change. Something can't. You know, and there's going to be strife in the meantime, for sure.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
So what would you, last question, and I always try to end the same way. If you knew someone is watching this today and is feeling that place of weariness, what would you just want to say to them?
Well, all I can say is what I'm doing. I can't even recommend it. I can just say what I'm doing because I'm
Sure.
there.
Yeah.
I'm profoundly weary and profoundly wary at some points too. You know what I'm doing? I'm waking up every morning and I'm spending 20 minutes to a half hour breathing the word Yahweh. Um,
That's great. That's great. Yeah.
You know, and I read this years ago, that you know, in Jewish lore, that Yahweh is actually the first word that a baby says because it's a breath.
Oh, okay, sure.
You know,
Yeah,
like, so you suck in and you breathe out, you know, and there's this breathing, and I'm just sort of finding myself, I'm having a hard time praying for this or that, or even knowing what's important, and I just need to find myself in the presence of God.
Yeah.
And then the second word I pray is Selah.
Oh, okay, yeah, sure.
And Selah can mean a bunch of things. It can mean amen, but or so be it. But it also kind of means I'm present.
Sure.
Here, right? And so like when a teacher would, you know, do the roll call, Steve Bell, Selah.
Okay. Yeah.
Like I'm here, right? I'm present to the moment. And so to go Yahweh Selah and breathe those words over and over again, I'm finding that 20 minutes to half an hour of that, again, it's not magic, but somehow I find my orientation being corrected again.
Wonderful. Yeah.
You know, and again, I think that's what I'm really believing prayer and worship really is ultimately about. It's not like God needs our wisdom about how to act in history.
Sure. Yeah.
Clearly, that can't be it. You know.
Yeah. Clearly, our wisdom is a little faulty.
Yeah. So how do I put myself in a sense in the presence of that and then rest in it?
Yeah.
And as I do that, I'm finding myself less anxious, have more energy, less stressed by what I see around me, and maybe, hopefully, a little bit wiser if somebody ever asks me something important.
Wonderful.
And I think, and so I would kind of go real. I would suggest to people go basic. You know, breathe. I'll tell you this one little story. As we close, and I had this vision years ago, and I never know which of these are of God and not. So I'll just tell you the story. But I found myself, it's kind of funny, in this position where I was face to face with God and we were touching noses. As our noses were touching, and as I breathed out, God breathed in. And when God breathed out, I breathed in.
Okay. Yeah.
So all my, you know, my dirty air was going into God, getting cleansed and being blown back into me. Wow. And we're just kind of like back and forth. But here's the funny thing: we're both giggling because we were too close. Right? Because you get really close to somebody, it's just awkward.
It's awkward.
So we're giggling. God and I are giggling as we're breathing into each other's mouths. Because and it was delightful. It was fun, but it was also I could just feel that, you know, the beauty and the reasonableness of that. Of course, that's, you know, and so I more and more as I get older, I'm getting a lot more simple. About what I'm going to do to maintain health and sanity. And learning just to be present to the goodness and the benevolence that I felt when I was a child before I knew the name of Jesus. And so I feel, in a sense, I'm starting to come full circle.
Wonderful.
Yeah. So I don't know if that answers the question, but
I think that's fabulous. I think sometimes speaking as a pastor and a priest, sometimes we make things way too complicated. Right. It's and I think that, you know, that morning rhythm of breathing can just be so profound.
There's something about it for sure. For absolute sure. It's certainly something that that is becoming a daily necessity for me.
Absolutely.
And then the other thing is, again, in our time and age, is like get out into nature. Go sit by a river. Go sit under a tree. Like there's just something about it. And again, I'm not trying to be new agey or anything like that, but there's just we are from the earth. We are Adam. We are made of this stuff. And to find ourselves part of that in a quiet and good way, I think is also important.
Absolutely. Steve, thank you very much. If people want to know more about your ministry, they can go to stevebell.com.
Yep.
Is that right? Yep.
And you can find everything there.
Yeah, everything there. Steve, thank you very much for this time.
Thanks for having me.
All right, wonderful.